Okay, I'm starting to think writing is more than just putting words down on paper, words on a page. I've noticed that it can become something much bigger than that. Because recently, I don't know if I am in control of my writing or if my writing is in control of me. Now, I know that sounds very abstract and like nonsensical, but hear me out. I'm at a point in my life where I'm away from home and I'm doing this simply to gain more experience in life because I think to write well, you need to have experiences. I can't write about the world and people spending my life in a very small, quiet town. I just don't think it works like that. And sure, you can make things up, but to what degree? So I'm away from home, I'm undergoing new experiences, and of course, there are emotional ones as well. I think that's the most important thing. Good writing conveys emotions which people can't describe to the best. Good writing captures a specific emotion in usually a beautiful sentence, or it can be more than that, paragraph, whatever. So I think that if you consider writing as an external force, where your writing is controlling you to undergo these emotional adventures. So for example, you could be in a situation where you are faced with undergoing something which you know is going to be painful. Normally, you wouldn't, because why would you put yourself through something like that? But I'm starting to think that I would put myself through that. Why? Because it's for my writing. So this is what I'm thinking about at the moment. I don't know if the actions that I'm taking are my own actions or actions that are governed by writing. And this makes me think that writing is much, much more than putting words on paper. It goes so much deeper than that. All my life, I've been writing stuff which I would not say is personal to me. Growing up, when people would have to share their work in like a class or something, people would get uncomfortable, and I never understood why people did not want to share their work, because I was always so excited for other people to read my work. And then I started looking things up, and I saw that the reason why people might not like to share their work is because their work is personal to them. And I used to think that that's strange, because my work is not that personal to me. But I realized that as growing up, I've been reading work from writers who don't write things which are too personal. They write exciting stories, adventures, things like this. For example, I read a lot of Stephen King. One of my favorite books of his is Misery. It's not exactly a personal tale. Some might say that the antagonist is symbolic of Stephen King's addiction to cocaine, but it's not personal. It doesn't tap too much into his character. There might be some odd things that reveal how his mind works, but there's no insight, at least I think, into his life. So growing up, I write what I read. I just replicate. That's how it is. Another writer that I like is Cormac McCarthy. He is a writer who had great influence on my style, but it wasn't personal to me. I would write about people in America, gruesome stories, things like that. But nothing would resonate with me until I read Norwegian Wood by Haruki Murakami. That changed everything. For the first time in my life, I read something personal. And in fact, it was the fastest I've ever read a book. I read it in 2 days or less because I enjoyed it so much. I couldn't believe it. And then when I reflected on it, I realized there wasn't much going on in the story. It was just about like a boy's life, a few years younger than me. Sure, there were some nice, intricate details and things, but there was nothing crazy that happened. And it really made me think that, wow, this is personal. And what's even more interesting is that everybody probably has some kind of story to tell like this. Another book which I read, which opened my eyes, was called Man and Boy. And this book was even more grounded in reality. There was no super deep philosophy, which Murakami tends to intertwine into his work. But this book, Man and Boy, is just about a single father. It is I can't imagine how many people can probably relate to something like this. It's not going to be a crazy amount, but there'll be a lot of people who can relate to that specific story, which then made me think almost everybody, not almost everybody, I'm sure everybody in the world has a story to tell. Because Man and Boy, it's based in reality. It is a glimpse into a father's life. There's no car chases, people getting gunned down. There's nothing crazy like that. It is just based in reality. And I didn't think people would like to read work that is set in this reality, because I mean, I thought people would read to escape this. But then again, the reader base is wide. And sometimes it is nice to read things in this world because it gives you comfort. It gives you an insight into the way that people think and deal with situations that you might be dealing with. Not everyone is going to be dealing in a situation where they are like #1 best-selling author and they get in a car crash and are rescued by the #1 fan, and the #1 fan chops off their feet. It's not always like that. So that made me think, if everybody has a story to tell, why doesn't everybody write? Then I realized not everybody can write. I didn't just realize that, but I finally understood. Not everybody can write. They might not even want to write, so they don't have a story to tell. Because I was speaking to an old man recently, he's the father of a close friend of mine. I think he's well over 70. He has a very interesting life story. He grew up in a very different way. He did a lot of things. And I said, why don't you write a book? But it just doesn't interest him. So after thinking about that, I'm wondering, what am I writing? What am I doing with my writing? Because what I write is just tiny, short stories, nothing too long, and it's pretty rubbish. It doesn't touch into anything too personal. The whole of my life, my writing life, I've been writing action stories, adventure stories, things which I do not know. And there is a classic saying, write what you know. And for the first time, I am understanding that I should write what I know. But back to the point, what am I writing for? I think that I'm waiting for my story to tell. In my life, one day I will undergo something which is worth putting into a story. And I'm not disregarding everything that happened in my life up until this moment. I'm sure I can find a story within it. But I'm still young, I've still got a lot of things to experience. And one day I will experience something emotionally, whatever. I will experience it and it will be good enough to turn into a story. So all this writing I'm doing at the moment, what is it for? I believe all the writing that I do is practice. I'm just honing the craft, practicing sentence structure, character development, structuring in general. All these things are building towards this one great story that I will live. Because I think everybody in the world, everybody, including you, if you're young, maybe not yet, but if you're older, you will have a story to tell, and I'm sure you already do. So, writing now is just about honing this skill. And I may be wrong, but this is just my opinion. I've come across this. And it all ties back to writing being some external force. It feels so much bigger than what it sounds. I think art in general is something which can consume somebody. Acting, painting, writing, these things can drive people insane. And I often think that the greats in all of these areas, they do become driven into a dark place sometimes by their craft. And I'm not saying I'm great. I'm not saying I ever will be great or held in the light with their name. It's a shame. But then again, I think these arts, I don't know whether they have a mind of their own. I don't know if you can think of writing as some kind of god, and it chooses who to impart some of its blessing onto. Does it choose who it wants to write to madness or not? Because then it just completely destroys the idea of your free will as a writer. Sure, how many people would choose to write, but how many people will be chosen to become consumed by this art that they have taken up. Vincent van Gogh, he cut off his own ear. And I know this might not have anything to do with his art. It was probably driven by some external factors as well. But it was the fact that he was a painter, and perhaps he did undergo some kind of madness. Now, I'm not an expert on him, I don't know much about it, but it's just interesting to think about. Another person who I think was consumed by their art was Heath Ledger, under his role of Joker in the Batman. It's another example. Phenomenal actor who died after taking on the role of a phenomenal character, so deep and just resembling some of the darkest sides of human nature. I think he is an example of somebody who was consumed by an art. And this is kind of left wing, but Conor McGregor, the MMA fighter, probably one of the best, one of the biggest names of the UFC, he had a quote, I don't remember exactly, but it was something to do with let your art drive you crazy. Let it make you mad. Let it make you insane. So, writing, I do think, is an external force. And whether or not it would choose me to consume, I will surrender myself to it. Because I think undergoing these harrowing emotions, pain, all these things, I think it's important as development of the writer. So that's why, even though it goes against logic and it goes against the protection of yourself, I would probably choose sometimes a darker, more dangerous path to follow, to gain an insight into a new world, which I'm just not aware of. And I know you can research nowadays with the internet, everything is so much more accessible. But I think there's nothing more important than experiencing something for yourself, good or bad. Experiencing it personally is the most important. There are so many things I would like to write. I want to take up fantasy, science fiction. I can read them, but I don't think I will ever write them. At this point in my life, I know what I like to write, and it's always changing. The writers who influence me the most, I'd say, are Stephen King, Cormac McCarthy, and another writer, a smaller writer called Donald Ray Pollock. These are writers whose voices, not necessarily their stories, but their voices on the page, who have just stunned me. I've never read anything like it, and I think it's brilliant. That type of voice. But no matter how much I like them, they never last with me. I've been influenced by so many great stories from so many different writers from around the world, but it was just their voices, their writing styles that have stuck with me until I stumbled across Murakami. He has the simplest writing style out of all of those writers I just mentioned. His writing is just so straightforward. The sentences are simple. I hardly ever have to search up a word because all the words he uses are simple. But sometimes he just drops some abstract, surreal description of philosophy and insight into something which is so relatable. He writes about love in a way which I don't really read. I mean, Cormac McCarthy and Stephen King, they don't really write about love, so I'm not too sure how they would go about it. But reading Murakami, I've realized that for now, I want to write about this world and this life. And I can draw on my own emotions. I can get influence from there. I don't have to rely on watching interviews about drug addicts and bank robbers and all these things, which I probably would have done before. But then again, I don't want to limit myself to this, because there are also other writers and storytelling styles which I'm heavily influenced by. I love Quentin Tarantino. I love his way of writing. I'm yet to read a novel in which it is like a Tarantino film. And sure, I don't think it's wise to try to write a novel for the big screen. I think you should just utilize that one medium as it is. Same for film. You shouldn't make a film in the hopes that it gets adapted into a book or whatever. Utilize that one medium to its maximum potential. So I'm still young and my writing has a long way to go. Maybe one day I will somehow combine Murakami with Tarantino, Showdown, something like that. I would love to read that, and I'm yet to find something like it, so maybe one day I can be the person to write it. But for now, this is a message to everybody. You should pick up a pen, open your laptop, whatever, write something. It doesn't have to be much. It could be 50 words, it could be 100, it could be 2,000. It could be anything you want. But write about something in your life. Everybody's been in love. At least when you get older, I'm sure you would have been. Maybe write about that. Maybe if it's painful to write about, maybe you're on the right track. Maybe that is a part of the writing God that is choosing you to write. Maybe don't let it consume you. Maybe you don't want to let it consume you. Maybe it doesn't even need to. Maybe what you write is simple enough that you don't have to fall too deep into this dark well. I don't know if, I don't know. I don't think I have this potential to be a great writer. I don't have this right perception of the world. That's another thing which I think great writers need. And great everything needs is a worldview. That is something I am yet to have. Like Kafka, he saw the world in such a depressive state. I don't see that. Maybe I don't need to. Maybe I don't need to write the world in that light. What I'm saying is I need to gain my own philosophy about the world, about love, about people, death, revenge. I need to have a viewpoint on all of these which I can put into my writing. Because I don't want to be floating around writing ambiguously on every topic. I want to be able to say, this is my viewpoint, here it is. If you don't like it, that's too bad. You can read my work, put it down. It doesn't bother me. But a viewpoint of the world is not something you just suddenly gain. Some people younger than me will probably already have one. Some people older than me probably still don't have one. I don't know if I can force a viewpoint of the world onto myself, or if I just wait and let one develop naturally. But until that time comes, I'm sure my writing will still be mediocre at best. Finally now, I'm touching more into my personal feelings, making my work more personal. But until I really gain some philosophy, learn more in this area, and yeah, I don't think my writing is going to go too far. But that is it. That's all I have to say. That is my just a novice's insight into writing. And if there's anything you can gain from this, if you've made it this far, I think is that everybody should write, or just try it at least once, because you never know what it's going to do for you.